All right, we're gonna jump into it. So good morning, everybody. My name is Kristen, and I am the project director for Hui Ko'olaupo'oko. So we have been hosting a set of virtual education outreach sessions since October of last year, and we're going to be continuing these live sessions on Zoom throughout the rest of 2021. So we've been focused a lot on propagation, different propagation techniques, and today we're going to be focused on outplanting. And then in the next few months, we're going to move into some project site visits and looking at our different restoration projects that we at Hui Ko'olaupo'oko manage and help to maintain. So let's see, we've got an opening poll up on the screen now. Just looking at some information, it looks like we've got some pretty intermediate propagation knowledge going on in our group of attendees today. And our second question in the poll is, have you participated in the HOK Plant Foster Parent Program? So this program is a pretty cool opportunity for people to learn how to care for some young native plants. It also alleviates a little bit of the overcrowding that we have in the HOK nursery. And it gives people a chance to kind of practice their green thumb. It's okay if some of the plants die and don't come back, but it also gives you a chance to keep some of those plants for your own yard, or bring the ones that you've been raising out and put them back into our project sites yourself. So you've got these little babies that you've grown and cared for, and then get to help plant them back out onto our restoration sites. So if you're interested in joining that program, you can send us an email and we'll set you up with the right type of plant for your climate on Oahu if you're on Oahu. Unfortunately, we can't send them off island. And then looking at the different types of plants people are growing right now. Ooh, 8 out of 8 are growing native Hawaiian plants. I love to see that. Lots of houseplants. I'm a houseplant geek. Also love my indoor plants. Some fruits, vegetables. I definitely need to get up on that. That's next on my list. And some tropical ornamentals. Cool, we got a bit of everything. Nobody's killing everything, that's good. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and close our poll there and let everybody take a peek. You can kind of see through those. All right, so in our series today, we have joining us is Jenna Masters, and Jenna's been kind of the driving force behind our past propagation series that we've been hosting through October. Jenna is a board member for Hui Ko'olaupo'oko, but she also works for the Natural Area Reserve System. So I am going to hand this over to Jenna. She was kind enough to be filmed and let us film her this past week in the field while her and her crew and some of the Hui Ko'olaupo'oko staff was out helping to outplant natives at some of the natural area reserves projects. So you'll be seeing a bit of video and then we'll have the time for discussion in between these video clips as well. So you'll be seeing some video from project areas that Jenna has worked at this week, and we'll definitely have time for questions. If anyone that's attending via our Zoom has questions during, feel free to stick those questions in the chat or just unmute yourself and you can ask questions. And then I'll try to monitor questions that are coming through on the Facebook Live as well and ask those to Jenna as we go. So Jenna, I'm gonna turn it over to you. Don't forget to unmute, there you go.
Awesome, thanks Nolani. Thanks everybody for tuning in. This is the best season for us because this is like our Super Bowl season. It's outplanting time. We're getting all of our plants in the ground during the wet season. So I was lucky enough to get a bunch of the HOK staff and some of their kupu members to come out and help us with one of our bigger outplantings that we have out in Pahole Natural Area Reserve. So I'm just going to show a couple of videos, you know, a little introduction video, a little bit about site prep. We'll probably talk about a little bit of a longer video on outplanting and then some techniques that we have and some of the monitoring that we do. So I think without further ado, and like Milani said, if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat, or there'll be segments in between where you can ask live questions. Feel free to jump on in there. All right, let's see if I can share my screen. I'm going to mute up real quick. How's it going, everybody? My name is Jenna Masters. I work for the Department of Land and Natural Resources in the Division of Forestry and Wildlife in the Native Ecosystem Protection and Management section. My job is predominantly to preserve unique ecosystem types and geological features, which means I work a lot in the natural area reserve system. So we have forest reserves and we have natural area reserves. Forest reserves are usually made for hiking and trails, people to interact with the forest, and the natural area reserves are based on unique ecosystem types. So today we're going to be doing our outplanting demo in Pahole Natural Area Reserve, which is a mixed mesic forest located in the Waianae Mountain Range. We're probably about 2,000 feet right now, and we're going to go through some of the tools that you need and some of the tools that we use. You also see some cameo appearances from some of my coworkers like Alexis Portillo and Zane, who will be showing us the kind of gear you need, some of the monitoring that we do. But in a nutshell, welcome to Pahole. Right, well, let's introduce you to some of our friends that we're going to be working with today. This is Uki Uki, Dianella sanwacensis. He is a great little shrub, can go into the full sun and also in shade. I like to plant them in groups. Here's another little guy, Naupaka Kuhibi. I'm pretty excited about this. This is some of our first runs with this guy. I believe it's a Scaevola gaudischautii. I'm sure there's someone that can correct me if I'm wrong. All right, and moving right along, we've got a wide diversity here, and this is what Pahole is great for. It's probably about 2,000 foot in elevation, so you get a lot of natives and a lot of non-natives, but the diversity levels here are extremely high in the Waianae. So we've also got sharpened tiara. I like to think of it, if you touch this leaf here, it's got a leaf, but then it also has a rim, and I like to say, oh, sharp your tiara. Huh? Okay, then we also got some Sapendus oahuensis, or also known as Lonomea, and this is going to be a really cool tree species. I'm really excited. They have good survivorship out here in the forest and have the capability of becoming like 40-foot tall trees. Let's see, anybody else? I think that's all we got in this section, but maybe we'll find some more for you. So once we've got all of our plants in the buckets, they're all packed up, we just like to do a gear check to make sure we have everything. So everybody should have, we're going to use Zane as our model, a water jug for watering your plants. Your backpack full of all your gear. You should also have a shovel and or trowel. And then sometimes we even like to bring one of these, which is an auger, to dig those deeper holes and sometimes very pesky soils. They're good for getting through rocks. Other than that, your positive attitude is the only thing you need. And we're off. As you can see, outplanting day is a big day for us as we then walk our double backpacks into the forest to go and restore it. All right, so we're just about to make it to our site. Just wanted to give you guys kind of a glimpse of what we walked through during our outplanting season, which is our Super Bowl season, really. Here's Brother Zane carrying the auger. How was the walk?
Not bad.
All right.
Getting more used to it.
So once we get to our outplanting site, the fun's not over. This is where the fun just begins. Say hi, everybody. Oh, all right. I just wanted to give you guys kind of a brief introduction to Pahole Natural Area Reserve and some of the stuff that we do there. You can see it's a lot of fun. Sometimes it is a lot of work, but that is kind of in a nutshell how we get ready for the day. We pack up our plants in our little plant backpacks, and then we'll carry them into the forest, and then that's just the beginning of it.
Okay, I have a couple questions. It's been a really long time since I myself have been up to Pahole, but for the other people that aren't familiar with the area, it is accessible to the public, correct?
Sorry. That is correct. So you can access Pahole for the public. So it's part of the Moku'ia Trail system. So if you were really gung-ho you could start all the way at the bottom in Mokulia and walk all the way up to the top. A couple other ways you can get up there is the Mokulia Access Road, which is not open to vehicle traffic, but you can walk up the road and then into the Natural Air Reserve. Another way you can is to get camping permits through Peacock Flats. So that's one of the coolest campsites, I want to say, on Oahu. You have to have four-wheel drive access, and you'll actually access that through Kuokala Road, which is right above Keawe'ula or Yokohama's beach. And then you can four-wheel drive all the way on there. You can take a camp and then make your way all the way into the Natural Air Reserve.
Yeah, that campsite is, I don't know, it's one of the coolest on the island to me because you're at about 2,000 feet elevation, right? And there's all the Norfolk pines, so it really does feel kind of mainlandish. When you're up there, it does feel like a world apart. Another question I had for you was, could you describe the forest a little bit more, where you guys were? I was seeing a lot of really mature trees, but it wasn't quite able to pick out what those trees were. And then I also noticed a bunch of cut brush behind you when you were talking. That looked like you guys had cleared something to prep the area. So could you tell us more about like the prep works for your outplanting area, and also what the mature native forest or just what the mature forest around there looks like?
Awesome. Yeah. So we actually, our next video is probably about a 2 or 3 minute video on site prep and some of the site prep that we did. But you're going to see a lot of these mature trees out in Pahole. It's a very old forest, right? So the Waianae mountain range is probably about 4 million years old. And from that time, all this kind of diversity has happened. And we've got all this mixture of common and really rare species there. So a lot of the trees are going to be even up to hundreds of years old. So of all kinds of diversity, and that's what's really great about this section. You're going to see a lot of koa in that site, particularly a lot of koa, a lot of seed bank from koa. You'll see olopuas, you're going to see ohias, you're going to see kopikos. I actually chose one of this site because it has some of the biggest kopikos that I've seen on the island. I'm talking about 20 or 30 foot tall kopikos over there. Alahe'es, pretty much any native plant you could think of might be like cruising in Pahole at some place, right? So it's a huge restoration area. We work a lot collaboratively. You know, it attaches to the forest reserve and then the natural area reserves on top of that. We have a lot of different organizations working in there, including Waianae Mountain Watershed, Oahu Army Natural Resources, just really getting some of this cool, unique diversity. And what's really interesting is it comes all the way from the rim to the gulch. So you're going to get a diversity of dry to wet species. And so one gulch is different from another gulch, is different from a side of a slope, and is very different from the rim. So you're gonna get all different kinds of plants, and we'll see a little bit more about that in the site prep video. And then I see a comment here from Steve. Where did you get the backpacks? So Steve, these backpacks are awesome because you can actually get those at NRS. And so they're not plant carrying backpacks. So NRS is like a company, I'm not sure what it stands for, but if you Google it, NRS, there'll be some backpacks out there, and I'll try and find the link for Nalani, and she can post it later on when she hosts a live video. But they sell the backpacks separately, and it's really great because you can carry water jugs in it. You can carry a pig in it if you wanted to, but we get giant plant pots. So what you saw in that actual backpack was a giant plant pot that just fits into that backpack. And so it kind of just encompasses and wraps around it. But yeah, you can get them online. We just looked some up. I'll have to find that link for you and I'll send it on over when I get the chance. Oh, you're on mute still.
Is it an outdoor gear store? I was trying to do a quick Google search, but I don't think I'm finding it.
NRS it has a bunch of gear. Oh, okay. I can look for it here. I'm going to try and launch the next video, but it is an outdoor gear store. And so NRS will have a lot of stuff like dry bags. They'll have things for outdoor adventures. We get a lot of our dry bags there. So this backpack was kind of a cool find. So you always just got to be shifting through the new kind of what's new out there and what can you use it for. And so it wasn't intended for packing plants in giant pots, I'm sure, but that's kind of what we end up using for. There's a lot of working on the fly when you work on the forest, and a lot of like adjusting how you do things. Like you see something, you're like, all right, well, this is going to work this way, but I'm going to make it work this way too. So you can carry less stuff, really.
And I think, you know, previously I've seen just old metal frame packs that have been pared down with the pack taken off, and or even like kid carriers, those packs, just with a big 5-gallon bucket or a 5-gallon pot kind of cinched onto it and strapped on. So you can.
Ooh. Yeah, and there's also bags that they'll do for like orchard planting. So we've got a couple of those as well. They're kind of like side strap bags that you can get from Forestry suppliers. Is another really good place to find kind of tree bearing gear.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and
it's an interesting field.
So as Jenna's launching the next video, it looks like Callie, I hope I'm saying that correctly, Callie at Three Mountain Alliance on the Big Island, I believe, she just posted an Amazon link as well to another tree planting bag that they're thinking about using there. So another good resource. Thanks for that info.
All right, so I am going to try and launch into the second video here. Bear with me. I'm going to put myself on mute. It's always real weird to watch yourself on video, so that's why you can see me laughing in the background. Well, welcome to our restoration site. We're out here in Pahole. We just wanted to give a couple minutes to talk about site prep, and that's a really important part about any outplanting, and you might know this in your own yard, but it's especially true out here in the forest. And we do it a couple of different ways. So if you look around, you can pan around. This is what I call a fast kill site. So this is where we come in, we remove a lot of the non-native trees, a lot of the non-native shrubbery, and then you're kind of left with this blank canvas to kind of start over. Obviously, you're going to keep a lot of the natives, like this giant ahupuaa tree here, who is a beautiful mother plant, and she is just dropping seeds. So that's going to start to regenerate that native seed bank. We're also going to keep things like the ohia trees, but we will take out things like giant strawberry guavas, right? And a lot of people haven't seen strawberry guavas this big. So this is one of the reasons why strawberry guava is such a bad pest. It gets so big here, you know, compared to its native homeland in Brazil. So once we've kind of cleared this site, we're going to go ahead and we're going to start planting. Another way we like to do it is a slow kill. So I'm going to take you over to a slow kill site that's right next to us. So come on over. You guys just saw a section of fast kill that we like to do. And that's really good for killing things like guava, Christmas berry, things that are really starting to get in your way. But when you start to get to like a really nice section of your yard, or even in the forest, if you happen to be doing restoration there, you'll start to find that, you know, some places have heavier density of native plants, like the section I'm in now. We call this a slow kill site because often we won't fell all the trees. We'll just take some of them out, and a lot of them will actually kill standing and let them kind of slowly die over time. And the real difference between the fast kill site and the slow kill site is that when you're in a fast kill site, you're opening up lots of light. Lots of light. There's a lot of room for invaders. That's going to be constant maintenance weeding. You're going to have to go back time and time again to check on your outplantings. It's going to be hotter. There's going to be a lot less shade compared to this guy, which is very shady. So you can see we have our native llama trees here. We've got koa trees, and they're providing a beautiful forest canopy. So this is actually ideal habitat for more shade tolerant species, things that can't handle the sun as much. So it's really up to you which technique you want to use. There's no right or wrong answer. Some stuff will work a little bit better, but a lot of it's based on experimentation. So just a little bit about site prep. All right. Yeah. Site prep is such an important part of it, you know, and a lot goes into it. Not only killing some of those bigger trees and making room for your new outplantings, but also that continual maintenance weeding from, especially when you get those sunny areas in there, anything from killing grass to a lot of clidemia we encounter as well.
Very cool. Yeah, so I guess I got a little ahead of myself. So when you were first talking in the first clip, everything, all that dead brush behind you was probably strawberry guava, some small stuff that gets piled, and it just breaks down on site, right?
Yeah, correct. So a lot of the times, what I've been starting to do now, and again, like I said, a lot of it is experimentation. And how you're going to do is I'll fell a lot of trees now, and before I actually buck them up, I'll kind of let them die out so all their leaves kind of fall off, kind of starting to create like a nice mulchy kind of soil. And then once that happens, I'll start bucking those trees up, and then to remove them to get actual area to outplant in, I'll start piling those sticks into different sections, and then they slowly break down. It's great. We do some photo points to see how long it takes to break down, and a lot of those piles will take several years to break down. I'm thinking probably at minimum 5 to sometimes 10 years, depending on the species that you have in there. Christmas berry and strawberry guava are some of the things we encounter the most of. And strawberry guava is going to take much longer. It's a much harder, much denser wood. We will leave some of the bigger logs on site though, right? Because those are going to be great nursery logs in the future. So if you're able to get those to start decomposing, and that's kind of a good thing about leaving some of your trees standing. When you do leave a tree standing, it'll start decomposing over time. And then when it starts to fall down, it's already broken up. So it's usually already inoculated with funguses or mushrooms. And then you're going to start to get moss, and it's going to start to hold that moisture. And then you can start sowing seeds like ohia on there and stuff. So it could be really cool over time. Yes, and strawberry guava is a great wood for the smoker. But unfortunately, in the natural air reserves, we leave everything where it is. It's a special permitting system if you do want to take anything out of the natural air reserves. And often we're hiking pretty great distances. So carrying out logs is sometimes the last thing on your mind at the end of the day.
Awesome. Okay, so what do you have up next for us? We're gonna...
Okay, well, I think we're gonna hunker down. This is gonna be the long one. This is gonna be the actual outplanting video. So let me pause this, and I am going to share my screen with you.
Yeah, so if anyone's got questions while the video is playing, go ahead and throw them in the chat, and then we'll come back to try to answer all those after this next video section.
So, you've prepared your site, you've selected your species, and now you're ready to plant. So many different options. As you saw, Zane was carrying the auger in earlier, and that's a great option. It doesn't compact your soil, but not everybody has that in their budget. It's also great for deeper pots. But when you're working with something like this, 4-inch pot, sometimes a good shovel is all you need. So I've got 2 types here. I've got the Tori short shovel, or Hori Hori. You can find these at Home Depot. These are really nice because they have a serrated edge on them. And then that edge is really good when you start to cut through roots. And this is going to be a really rooty section. We also have this guy, which is one of my personal favorites, the cold steel throwing shovel. And I have to give props to my old boss, Kahali Pali, for this, because he's the one that first introduced me to this. So, really good, sharpened on all edges. So that's really good for breaking through the soil and also cutting up roots. When you're planting a plant, ideally you want to look at your plant, feel where he wants to go, but then also you're trying to dig a hole that's bigger than your plant. So you want it to be a little bit bigger and a little bit deeper. Your end goal really is to get your plant into the hole comfortably, fill it with soil, and then make it flush so that the top of the plant, where the soil already is inside of the pot, is also flush with the ground. Now, if you're planting on a hill or you're planting in a really dry area, you might want to plant it just slightly deeper so that you can kind of create a moat. So that way, when you start watering it, it's able to catch that water and use that water throughout its life to develop those roots and grow into a nice strong plant. So we'll get a little bit closer here and we'll see if we can start digging a hole. Come on in. Okay. So a lot of times, especially in these site preps, you're going to have a lot of sticks, a lot of debris. And you're going to want to keep that close because that'll actually be some really good mulch. You can see there's all kinds of little critters already living in the soil, and that's great. But to initially dig your hole, you just want to clear that area up because really all you want in your hole is going to be that plant in the soil. You don't want any sticks. You don't want air pockets. You don't want rocks in there because that'll just impede the plant from growing. So I'll start off with my throwing shovel because I feel like that's the best. Just going to stab it down as hard as you can, right? Kind of measure your pot. You can see we're already starting to hit some roots. This used to be a guava area. So you're going to find a lot of different kind of guava roots. So you can see here, we've already cut through a pretty nice sized stick. Thanks, throwing shovel. Get a little bit deeper here. And so once you get your hole going, and you're like, you know what, I'm pretty happy with my hole. Like maybe I think it's time to plant. You want to save this dirt as well, because you're going to have to put that back into the hole before I get too far ahead of myself. So here it is. Oh, this hole is great. I think I'm ready to plant. Best way to do it is test out your pot in there. So once you put your pot in there, you can kind of see that this hole actually is not as great as you thought it was. It's a little bit too shallow, although it is wide enough. So we're just going to take some time, dig it a little bit deeper, a little bit wider, really work that area in there. Remember, the softer the soil, the less roots, the less rocks, the easier it's going to be for your plant to survive. Okay. All right. So, once we've got our hole, I'm going to just take care of this root here. Yeah. Perfect. Once we've got our hole, once again, we're going to test our pot. Ah, that's looking much better. So you can see that roots are going to have lots of room to grow. They're deep enough so where you're going to get enough coverage of your soil. So I think we're ready to go. So a couple things when you're planting. I like to plant with my plants facing east, you know. East is a really good way. It's where the sun comes up from. It'll take in a lot of that morning light. A lot of times if it gets too hot, your plant will start to shut down and it won't photosynthesize through the rest of the day. So I like to plant with my plant to the east. Some people will say Pico's to the east as well. But really just look at your plant and see where he's going. I kind of feel like he's here. We got our east here. That's his growing face. That's where he was growing in the nursery. So I'm going to pop this guy out, put him in the hole. Right? You can see this beautiful root ball that we've got going on here. So a lot of people, you can kind of start to see it's starting to get a little bit root bound. And that's when it starts to conform to the pot that it's in. There's two methods you can do this. If it's not too root bound like this, I'm actually not going to mess with that roots. Because once you start messing with the roots, you might start breaking smaller roots. You might start taking root hairs off of it. Now, if this was really, really tight and there was a lot of roots and it was really bound, it would be pot bound then. That means those roots are going to grow within the same shape that it's already in, right? And in that case, sometimes I will loosen up the roots. Maybe just give them one of these. But in any case, you're trying to not damage these very fragile roots now. You have to either realize that these have come from the nursery or maybe they're at your house and they've been extremely babied, right? In the forest, plants don't grow like this. So these ones have been hardened off for a couple days before they've actually been out here. So once you've got them finished hardening off, you pop them out, you're going to stick it in here. Now you found it, oh no, my hole is a little bit too deep. Do I want to plant my plant right here? Not just yet. It's where you take your extra soil, you're going to build it up. What you don't want is to plant your plant too deep. If you do, sometimes you can get what we call stem rot. And so if you plant it too high, it's not used to all that moisture, all that water collecting on the surface. So it can really start to rot out. So once you got it to an appropriate height, I'm saying a little bit more. Put it in here. Ah, that's looking good to me. You're going to start filling it out, right? So you're going to start to filter out things like these sticks, things like these rocks. I like to big chunks of soil. And you'll have chunks of soil like this as well. Just go ahead and break those up. Break them up. Get all the stems out of there. Get all the roots out of there. Throw those sticks out of there. Right? Start to push it in. Usually once I get about halfway full in the hole, I'm going to take my little bear claws. A lot of people wear gloves, which is probably a great idea. I don't. I like to feel the soil. I'm just going to lightly pack it in. So you're not trying to pack too hard, but what you're trying to do is avoid all those spaces, all those air bubbles that could be happening. So just gently pack it in. Gently pack it in. So now you're still exposed and you're just going to continue the process, right? So bring it around. You got all your soil. Start to throw those sticks out. Throw those leaves out, right? Start to fill it up. Sometimes you might run out of soil. And in that case, you're going to want to dig another hole next to it and bring some of that soil in. So that's one thing that you never think about, is getting rid of that soil that you dug out of your hole. It's actually really important. So bring it back in. Okay, I got some of this. So now that we've got our plant fully covered, I can give a couple more in here. So if you zoom in, you can kind of see that this plant is still a little bit high. So I'm actually still going to put a little bit of soil in here, but you can start to see how it's flushing out, right? You want that top to be level with your ground. So I'm going to put a little bit more. I like to say, for good measure, I put maybe a 1/4 inch more soil, because it will start to sink, right? So this soil is not completely compacted, and when you start to water it, those spaces are going to fill in. Your plant's going to sink in a little bit more. That soil is going to be compacted. So if you really want to be safe, I usually put about like a 1/4 inch layer of soil on top of that, and that usually, you know, compensates for any sinkage that's going to happen with this plant. Okay, so now we've got it planted. You're level, you're flush. One good test would be, and do this lightly, is just a little bit of a tug. So if you tug it and that plant comes right out, it's usually not planted deep enough. And this will depend with your soil type, because, you know, there's clays, there's sand, so there's some soil that's going to be looser than other soil. But a general good rule of thumb is you should be able to give it a light tug, and it should not come out of the ground, right? So I'm confident now that I've closed all the air spaces in there. I'm not going to get root rot. I'm not going to get stem rot. And this is where it's kind of cool. You can kind of see there's a little depression, and this is really good for planting. Sometimes I'll build up a little moat around it, so that when I do water it for the first time, it's going to really hold that water and really soak in. And then when it does rain, it's the rainy season now, but obviously we're going to start going into a drier summer season. It's still going to be able to catch all that water. Another cool thing you can use, and especially in these restoration sites, is all this free mulch. So take that mulch, I like to just mulch it up, right? So all this is going to start to hold that moisture into the plant, that topsoil moisture. So when it does rain, it's going to dry out a lot slower. So whenever I can, I like to give this thing a good mulch. For our purposes, since we are going to be mapping and monitoring some of these, I will leave my pot right here. We have about 140 plants we're putting in the ground today. I'm going to leave my pot right here. When the next person comes by to water it, they're going to take this pot out. That way I know that this plant has got enough water to survive till its next watering. And that's Outplanting 101.
Whew, that was a long haul, guys.
That's really awesome information, and I think we had some really good questions in the chat too. One from Callie, that she asked how many plants you were trying to get in the ground that particular day, and what numbers are you working with for that entire site? So I know this day was, you said, about 140.
Yeah, we're doing about 140. And so this is kind of interesting too with the fast kill versus the slow kill. When you open up that space, you end up having to put more and more plants in there, kind of compensating for this giant gap that you created. Whereas if you do a slow kill, you end up putting in less plants because there's so much shade and it's still very shady dominated. But we did about 140 plants in that site. I'll probably put in a couple more rare species coming up here pretty soon. And then we'll kind of repeat that process. For me personally, I like to only work with, especially if I'm doing a fast kill, probably about 1/4 of an acre a year. I'm also going to supplement that with seed scatter. So I've got a bunch of koa seeds that I collected from the last couple of years that we're kind of storing in our refrigerators. I'm going to go ahead and scarify, soak those, and then I'm going to start sowing those as well. In that particular site, I'm going to use koa, but a lot of times I like to use bidens. I like to use maki, things that are going to start to go with that shade. In our next watering, we're also going to start doing fern transplants into those really open areas. Like right now is a really good time to transplant ferns. And so I'll go to like areas that have a lot of ferns, a lot of built up ferns. And from those edges, I'll start taking fern plugs. So I'll take that throwing shovel and I'll stab myself out a square. And so I'll take that entire square, as much soil as I can with it, because you don't know what's living in that soil, that helping that, you know, plant grow. And then I'll go ahead and I'll start transplanting it into our sites. So just planting is not the only thing that we're doing here. So it's site prep. We do a lot of seed scatter at the same time. We'll put plants in, we'll transplant ferns. And then because these are common natives that we're working with in this particular site, we'll do probably about a follow-up watering in 2 weeks. And then we'll kind of just let nature take its course at that point.
Yeah, I think that's an awesome thing to touch on also, is that this is a really heavy outplanting season for a lot of the environmental nonprofits, and we have, you know, a fairly short window throughout the winter that we try to get plants in the ground and get them to be self-sufficient, get them nicely rooted so that they can make it through the summer without us having to come in and water them as well. And I think you guys were even playing catch up this week in the field from the nasty weather the week prior. So you had extra to do, extra work to do.
Like I've got another out, I just did another 140 outplanting yesterday. So it is a heavy outplanting season, and this is just one of our many restoration sites that I'm particularly spearheading. But within our program, there's several restoration sites all over and in multiple natural area reserves. So that's why I call this a Super Bowl season. It's like everything that you've done through the whole year, all of your site prep, all of your maintenance weeding, your seed collection, you're growing through the nursery, this whole outplanting process just really takes a toll. You could even imagine that some of those plants are worth hundreds of dollars. If you were going to equate that into people time spent from seed collection to germination to the different stages of potting. For example, those lonomeas that you saw are probably about 1.5 to 2 years old. I've got other plants that aren't going to be ready to outplant for 2 to 3 years, like a llama, for example. It's a very hardwood, very slow growing. But I've also planted plants like Pisonia, umbellifera, Brunoniana, so Papala Kepao, that are going to be ready within 6 months. So another thing I really like to focus on is weedy natives, things that are going to take these place of these kind of invaders here. So I like to do a lot of seed scatter with plants that are going to grow really fast, those first successional generation plants that are might not be as long lived as an ohia tree. You know, they might not live hundreds of years, they may only live 20 years, but they're going to be able to start developing that soil, start reconditioning that soil to the native plants, you know, as plants drop and as they start to deteriorate, even things like koa. You know, as the koa phyllodes fall, the leaves of the koa tree, they're going to start breaking down, giving you the nutrients that you need. And then also weird kinds of microbial symbiotic relationships in the soil are also happening that you can't see. So a lot of stuff goes into it, definitely.
Yeah, very cool. And then another question from AJ was asking if you could talk a little bit more about planting to the east. And I also wanted you to expand a little bit on, you said hardening off the plants.
Yeah. So we'll start with hardening off. I think that'll be the easiest. So once these plants go into the nursery, and like I said, they're really babied. And a lot of times in the forest, you might have 100 seeds, and out of those 100 seeds, this is kind of just a guesstimate, you know, maybe 5 to 10 of those would actually survive within that area due to competition, due to better genetics, or just, you know, being more able to survive in this area. Where in the nursery, when I collect those 100 seeds, usually if they've got a good fill rate within the seed, all of those seeds are going to germinate. So now I'm working with 100 different plants. And so now you're growing these plants, they're getting constantly watered, they're getting fertilized, they're getting ready for it. And that's not usually what's happening in the forest per se. So before we outplant, we like to do a hardening off period. And this could last anywhere from 4 days to 2 weeks to a month, just depending on what kind of species you're doing and what kind of habitat you're putting it in. And that's actually where you stop babying this plant. Maybe you don't water it twice a day. Maybe you only water it once a day, or then maybe you water it every other day. You stop giving it fertilizers, things like that, kind of preparing it to get into this harsh reality of being outplanted into the forest. So like it's mostly a grace period. And so we call that the hardening off period, when you really start to get a little bit tougher. You know, you're taking off the IV, you're still going to get fed, but it's going to be a little bit rougher. It's like getting ready to we don't want to just throw them out to the wolves. And then, so the second question, what was the second question?
Planting to the east. So Jenny says she hardens off all of her plants, but she just calls it neglect.
That's basically what it is.
Yeah, so AJ was asking about planting to the east, and I'm familiar with AJ's site too. She's got a big hillside of Halikoa that she's really interested in what she could do to prep that hillside to outplant, or what might be able to coexist with the Halikoa, if you have any input on that for her, and planting to the east also.
Sure. So it's really interesting. So if you look at some of the forests that you have, usually your northeastern slopes are more native dominated, where your southwestern spaces are definitely more heavily invaded. And this could just be because of the storms that come through are usually from the southwest, and they'll drop those seeds there. But then also in the northeast, you kind of get that morning light. And so as the sun starts to rise from the east, you're going to start hitting all that morning light. And this is usually when plants are the most vigorous, right? Maybe they're kind of cooling off, or it's been moist during the nighttime. And then here they're starting to catch all that morning light. And so when I say facing to the east, a lot of the times you can see how a plant's been growing. You know, usually it'll stretch in one direction or the other direction. And I like to kind of just maintain that face where it's already facing, which is usually east. So as the sun works its way through the day, and it gets hotter and hotter, and the plant has kind of expended the energy that it has, it'll start to kind of shut down. Plants have like structures called things like stomatas, which they'll start to close as it starts to get hotter. And that'll stop the transevaporation from plants, either from the wind or from the sun. And then at that point, not all plants, but most plants, you know, I want to say roughly maybe around 2 o'clock, when it gets really hot and it gets into that peak, maybe they don't have enough energy to continue the photosynthesis process. So they're actually going to start to shut down. And at that point, they're just starting to lose nutrients. So I like to try and get them in the morning. They can catch that fresh light. And then, you know, peak goes to the east is another thing that I was taught by my old bosses. You know, peak goes to the east. East represents growing point. It's life, where west usually, signifies death and kind of the closing of things and opening that plant up to the new life, to the new light. It also kind of coincides with how the sun goes as well.
And planting to the east with that morning light just might not be possible on all properties too. So would facing your plants towards, you know, that first bit of light, of direct light that they get, would that be ideal?
Yeah, I think so. And a lot of that too is part of that experimentation process, since every site is very different. And as you have different plants that you're removing from different sites, like Kailua, you know, those things are really long lived. They're going to last a long time. You can kind of even see maybe how they're starting to grow. You know, plants will grow to that light. And so kind of take a cue from the plants that you already have on site. Are they facing a particular way? Are they starting to grow in a certain way? So that when you remove them, you can kind of mimic that for the plants that you decide to put in.
Very cool. Do we have any more videos to share?
We do. We've got a mini one about augering, and then we have a little bit about monitoring if we have enough time. So I'll throw on this auger video, because Sana was like, you got to show that auger.
Oh yeah, augers are a lifesaver. I think I'm gonna need to go rent one from Home Depot just for my own yard soon.
Okay, bear with me here. I am just going to transfer us over. Yeah, the auger is pretty awesome. And everybody at HOK was like, I think we need one of these. And I was like, you guys should probably get one.
Our poor girl is just digging and digging out there. And I wanted to just add really quickly for HOK, when we're doing outplanting, you know, we're in that pretty like fast kill kind of zone. And we don't have a lot of tree cover and tree canopy, especially at our Haia project. We're working in an estuary, so we've got no canopy cover. So we tend to plant maybe 25 to 50 plants on a day when we've got volunteers out, and we try to clear a large area, or to clear at least, you know, 20 by 20 feet, more if we can, and then spread a variety of different plants out throughout that area as well. So I really like planting with a wide planting palette and diversity, and I love to try new species as well. And we put maybe 5. If I've never tried a species in that area, I'll put 5 in and see how they do in a month, and if they're doing good, sweet, let's plant more of those and come back to it. And we've definitely got the plants that are our go-to species that we know are going to do well in certain areas too, and so those will be some of the first ones to go into those areas. And then We have other challenging project areas under the monkey pod trees where nothing grows, nothing wants to grow. And so every 6 months we're trying, every planting season, we're trying a new species in areas like that. And some things take for a little while and some things don't. And we just got to keep trying. So. All right, Jenna, let's check out your auger.
So, we showed you how to plant shrub species, and tree species are pretty much the same, but as you can see, sometimes they have a little bit of a bigger pot. So this is a dibble. You can also have tree pots, dibbles, and these are designed so that the roots can grow deeper and longer into the ground. The taproot that comes from this guy will eventually tap into the ground and anchor the entire tree. So this is a Lonomea, Sapinus walhuensis, can grow to be a giant 40-foot tall tree. So it's really imperative that we plant it properly. As you can see, we're in that fast kill site that we talked about. It's very slopey. You can see here. Behind me, you can kind of see these terraced off logs and sticks. And what we do this for is, especially when we clear cut an area, you might experience some erosion or things sliding down the hill. They also act as seed catches. So if I throw seeds in here and there's a bunch of debris that's gathered, it's very likely that they can start to germinate within that. Also pretty good for standing on when you are sliding down a hill. So with the tree pot, instead of using the shovel, which you can use the shovel, but every now and then, sometimes after you get, a foot into the ground or a half foot into the ground, you might reach some soil that's even harder, or even rocky. It's easier to get in there with an auger. So this is your auger, a standard size bit. You should make sure that your bit is about the same size as your pot, if not a little bit bigger, right? Because you always want your hole to be about the same size and or bigger than your pot. It will get a little bit loud here. So the auger is really swift. So I always tell people it's not about how many holes you do, it's the quality of the hole that you create. So on a hill, I like to start at a little bit of an incline, and then I'm going to push up and I'm going to straighten that hole up. And you're going to have to make it deeper so that the face or the bottom of the pot is into the ground. Because if you do it too shallow and just the top matches, so up on the upslope, that whole bottom is going to be exposed. And if you leave those roots out, they're going to have a tendency to dry out, and that would actually kill your plant as well. So I'm going to start this auger up. You're going to see it. You might want to turn down your computer a little bit. We'll see if it'll give it to me in the first go around, and we'll try and dig a hole for you. Okay.
Oh.
So, technical issues are always the thing. Definitely. But number one thing you have to remember is to turn it on. Hope you enjoyed that struggle bus moment. Right? So set your auger in. On a hill, you're going to come a little bit further out. Start a little bit of a drill. A lot of times you're going to run into some roots. You're going to have to wibble wobble it. Okay. Once you think you've got your appropriately sized hole, I might still be yelling. Take your plant, pop it in the ground, make sure it fits. Oh, that's going to be lots of room, and it's going to be lovely. So that's basically your auger 101. Don't be afraid to plunge and pull out, because with every pull, you're going to get some dirt. But remember, you're still going to need that dirt to plant your plants. So if you have the capabilities for an auger, definitely use it. If you don't, shovels are good enough.
Yeah, we definitely had some struggle bus moments, me and Sana. I was like, Sana, I don't know what's going on. I probably tried to start the auger for about 10 minutes, and then I looked at her and I was like, I forgot to turn it on.
Another thing that I wanted to touch on, Jenna, was how you were saying, you know, wiggle the plant just a little bit. So to make sure that you've got it kind of nicely packed into its hole and that it's not super loose, so it's going to fall over in the wind, or even with the heavy rain, it could get dug, just pulled out of the hole. So we typically, with HOK, we've got volunteers doing a lot of our outplanting with us, and for some people, it might be the first time they've ever planted something. So anytime we've got volunteers planting, at least for the first plant they do, we make them stay by their plant. They have to raise their hand and have one of our staff or interns come over and check their plant, and we do the wiggle test. We do the same thing. We will come over and check their plant and make sure it's not bouncing out of its hole. And if it is, then we work with them to get it planted tighter, because that's so, you know, I found that in itself is so key to the success of a plant in the field. Just having it packed nicely into its hole, it's not going to fall over, dry out, get those bugs in there in that area. So I think the planting in the hole is nicely packed. You want it snug as a bug in its new home.
And that's really important too, because if you do leave those air pockets in there and it does rain, often it'll fill up with water and that'll cause root rot, you know, and that's especially true when you get into like clay soils as well. That can actually act as a cup and just hold all this water and causing all this like rot going on. So you always want to scrape up all your holes, make sure it's not too slick in there so that the water can penetrate through.
All right, so you wanted, and you did have one more video for us about how you guys do some follow-up monitoring. I think we've got a few more minutes left before it's 5 to 10 o'clock right now, 5 till. So we've got a few minutes, and I'd love to hear more about the monitoring that you guys do to follow up with your plants, and then we can go ahead and open up for any more questions. I know there's been some great discussion in the chat too, so we can circle back on the chat and any other questions.
Awesome. Okay, let me pause this guy. It's great. I got my coworker to help me out here with some of this stuff. I'm like, all right, on the spot. What are you doing?
So every year when we're outplanting, we want to monitor some of our common, or all of the common native species that we outplant. If we're planting 100 or more, we try to get 25 individuals of each species to monitor. And if we don't have it that many, we just will monitor all of that species that we outplant. So essentially what we're looking for on planting day is the height, vigor, meaning the health of the plant, and if there's any reproductive organs on the plant. So for vigor, it essentially means overall health. And here is an example of one species in 3 stages of health. So this would be healthy, this would be moderate, and this would be poor. And this is not dead, it is alive, and we can tell that by scraping off a piece of the bark, and you can see the cambium layer below the bark is green. So we know that this is alive, but it's just in poor health. So we like when we're planting, so when we come back in a year from now to see how they're doing, we can compare and contrast how they were doing a year before and then how they're doing a year after planting. And we do this to understand survivorship by species and by site, so we can better manage and choose where we're putting species in the future. And so we can come back the next year and find them so we can monitor them. We do make hand-drawn maps that look like this. And we just use these we make these on outplanting day, and then we save them for the following year so we can find them again. And to mark the plants that we're going to be outplanting, to make, obviously, so we know what plants are what, we do make these tags. So we have a wire. We use these tags that we write their codes on, and then we'll flag them with some colorful flagging. And we put this in the ground next to the plant so we know where it is the following year. The code that we put on the tags has to do with their species. So we use our taxon code, the first 3 letters of the genus and the first 3 letters of the species name. And then we give them the number, a number 1 through 25 if it's the first time of the year being planted, but as more and more are planted every year, we just build on the number of where we left off last year. So for instance, you know, we have like a Dinella sandwich census would be Disan 84. And we just write that on here, and then that's how we signify them on the map, and then that's how we signify them in our data. So the next year, everything can be found and organized.
Yeah, so that was just a little bit of a tidbit about how we do our monitoring. Because we put so many plants out into so many different areas, we just want to kind of keep a pulse on if anything's living. Are they living? Are they dying? So we monitor a small subset just to see how they're going. And then we'll also measure how tall they are to see if some sites are better than others, if they grow bigger or faster in other sites. So.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jenna. It's super cool to see some upland areas where, as Hui Ko'olapoko, we're pretty used to working in coastal and urban areas. So it's nice to see those upland areas again, and nice big koa trees and all the other cool common forest natives that we don't typically get to play with at HOK. And maybe Jenna, you can take a quick peek into the chat too. We've had some cool discussions about nitrogen fixing plants and some different Naupaka kuahivi. I'm familiar with AJ's site, and it is a pretty steep slope with lots of halekoa on it. So I know it's a really tricky site there. That's gonna be a fun one, AJ.
Yeah, AJ, I would suggest if you are doing halekoa, and especially if you're using herbicide, a lot of times when we control halekoa, if you're not using herbicide, that's cool too. But if you do cut it, I would suggest doing some of those terraces. That's what I like to do in some steeper slopes. I wouldn't make them huge, you know, maybe just kind of like, what is this? Probably like half of a foot face diameter. And lay those sticks down. It doesn't have to be very tall, but that's going to start to catch some of that soil, unless you're going to use some other kind of erosion control like burlap, you know, wrapped in soil, because that's going to start, the soil will slide, you know, and those areas will catch it. And then you can also put seeds in there. Yeah, I see some of this EVA and stuff. That's going to be really good on slopey areas. I'm starting to do a lot of ule right now in some of my slopey areas. It does grow much slower. I've also been doing a lot of the EVA in a lot of my areas and covering a lot of my stick piles. And those ones are almost sometimes as easy as I like to call a plug and play, where I'll just take a cutting and I'll directly put it in the ground. And just, but it will take a couple of years. It takes maybe 2 or 3 years. Anything in the forest is going to take, you have to think of it in the spans of like 5 years, the very minimum, but you should be thinking of it 20 years at the minimum to like past when you're going to be, you know, dead already. So, and then the difference of sectionals that you can get in there, right? So if you have a really completely altered site in halekoa, it's going to take a little while for it to get to a point where it can foster these different types of native species. So I like to start with those really common native weedies, like mamaki if you can, Bidens, torta, things that are going to start throwing shade out there, retain moisture, ferns. You can even use some of those bigger logs, start to break them up, like you can bust them in half, start to water those logs, really watch them decompose on site.
Yeah, I think that terracing is a really awesome idea. If you're going to try to control some of the halekoa, you can build the terraces just using those halekoa stumps there too, and build that up and add some of your yard waste into that area and try to build the soil up. Even if you've got potted plants, if you're changing out soil in your potted plants too, I typically save all of the soil from my potted plants to put into other areas in the yard. If I need to fill in a hole in the yard, or if the plant dies from that pot, I'll save the soil. So I'm not in an area or in a nursery that has to follow strict protocols like Jenna's nursery would be. So in a home nursery, you can reuse that soil or add it to help build your soil on that steep slope. And that'll help you get some pretty healthy soil that'll be able to accept plants. And watering before you even have anything in that area can help to kind of break down and, you know, get that soil prepped for planting. And then Jenny, I know you were asking about Naupaka, and I'm not super familiar with your area, but I know Jenny is on Molokai. Some of the dry slopes or the dry ridges on Molokai do have a lot of Ilia growing on them, but the deer really do love to eat it. So I've seen some really huge Ilia bushes on Molokai, and they're so funny. They look like an ice cream cone. They're just these brown bulbs down low, and then they're green on top because the deer can only reach so far. So I was looking at this bush going, what is this big brown and then green right there? And it's because the deer are eating everything, and they're these round bushes. So the deer love them, but they do really well in that dry, like Walapue area type Molokai soil. And then, oh, we got a bunch of messages coming through. Yep, Ko'olaupoko, we've got big area that Huio Ko'olaupoko covers, traditionally including Hawaii all the way up to Kualoa. So it's a pretty big area, lots of different climates, potential climates for us to work in, and lots of different species too. We got some great questions. Let's see, feel free to come off mute too, you guys, and just ask questions. So Maya asked, do you need any extra components such as perlite or fertilizer during weeks after transplanting, or is the soil in Hawaii normally efficient without it? Jenna?
I think most Hawaiian soils are actually nutrient devoid because a lot of them have a constant rain and there's a lot of plants going on there. I typically don't fertilize my plants once I put them in. A lot of the times they might have fertilizer still with them. And so if you looked at the outplanting video, I actually dumped, when I was popping out that plant, I dumped it over the hole, and that's to catch anything that could still be in there. A lot of people will use like Osmocote or things that like degrade and release nutrients over time gradient and temperature gradients. So depending if you want to fertilize, you can. If you have like really nutrient devoid soils, like if you're in a really boggy area, like Mountain View, or if in Molokai you have a lot of really disturbed like red dirt, you might want to do a little fertilization there and extra watering. But I wouldn't add perlite or anything necessarily to that unless you're trying to increase drainage. Like if you have like a clay pit, for example, that you're trying to plant in, which wouldn't be the best to do. But you can, dig an even bigger hole and amend that with different types of soils so that it'll grow a little bit better. Then you'll start to have that kind of cupping effect as well. But typically, you should look around what you have in that area already, some of the surviving things, because I guarantee you, if you are not native dominated and you're in an invasive forest, you'll probably find some sneak peeks of natives that are already in that area that have, could be surviving, but have just been outcompeted. And I see some of this, like, yeah, if you do fertilize your, sometimes your non-natives will outcompete you for that. They're just very competitive in that sense. So, yeah, take a look around at what's in your area, what's in kind of your seed zone, or, in their elevation or moisture gradients. And then you can start to walk around, like even places that you are going to get halikoa, things like Monomea, Alahe'e, Willy Willies, some of that really dry land stuff will go out there, and it was meant to survive there. I think even things like Plecthanthus, like tiny little mints, that you know, you kind of take for granted as you're walking around. You know, just that would be my number one. Survey the area, see what you got going just within your, you know, couple mile radius, because you're going to find some native plants that are holding on for sure.
Mm-hmm. And then there's another comment in the chat about how and hau'ula in particular, and it brings up a quick memory just from the other week. So February is Hawaii Invasive Species Awareness Month, and there's a bunch of really awesome discussions all month about different invasive species and their effects on Hawaii and even their uses in the state and their uses in other parts of the world. And we had a really interesting discussion about how it is considered kind of, to some people, an invasive native plant. It's a weedy native plant to a lot of people, but I think that it's not utilized in the same way that it once was. It was used for cordage. It was used for different parts of canoe building, for hale building. It was used for for tools, for so many different purposes. And I think that high utilization, that high usage of the plant maybe kept its growth in areas in check. So it is one of those plants. She's saying, I don't want it, or the comment was that I'm afraid to plant it in the ground because I don't want it to take over my area. And yeah, they grow really well. Great like hedges between you and your neighbor, but they can grow pretty fast. But I think if you are going to plant it in the ground, it's a great opportunity to start to learn how to utilize it. Let's see if we can see. There's my chunk of, I'm like, which way? There's my chunk of how that is drying, getting ready to be braided and used for cordage. So it looks like a big ponytail hanging back there. So if you're gonna plant it, then learn how to utilize it. You learn how to harvest it, but don't be afraid to plant it. It might take a little extra work.
Definitely, because you know, you can always cut it back. Cow's one of those really hardy plants that you could just bowl ahead the whole thing and it'll just grow back for you. So don't be afraid to plant it. You can always cut it back. You can always take cuttings from it. You can watch the vegetative cutting section of it. And then, you know, you can continue to propagate that plant. So don't be afraid to plant it. It wants to go in the ground for sure.
Definitely. Okay, are there any other questions that went in the chat that we have missed? If I missed them and you're jonesing for an answer, come off of mute and ask us now. Anybody? Cool. Okay, I am going to, so as we wrap up for today, I just want to thank you guys. Oh, AJ, go for it.
So if you want to try anything in my hillside, I would love to know what kinds of plants grew in this area originally and try to reproduce that. So I face south on that hillside, I face the Ko'olau. It's very hot, very dry, and I'm about a half mile inland. I could almost walk to Lanikai Beach through the golf course. So if you want to give any ideas, I'm more than willing to try to repopulate with native plants.
Yeah, definitely. Let's try to set up a day and I'll come by and we can maybe start to prep a terraced area. We'll start to prep that, and then I'll take some cuttings of different things, or I have some cuttings already, and we can, once the soil starts to build up in that area, then we can get you some different plants to try out in that area. And then maybe by, you know, next fall, we'll have an idea of what's doing well there and we can get more of those going for you.
Yeah. And don't be afraid of grasses and shrubs.
Yes.
It might be typically a grass shrubland area, so planting trees might not even be the best bet. So look into your different types of native grasses, like even things like aveo, chenopodiums, things that are just going to rain seeds down on that hill and kind of stabilize it. You're really going for a lot of hill stabilization if it's very slopey. So.
And Steve just put into the chat as well a very cool, I believe it's a scientific article that has native plant distribution maps. So you should be able to just kind of copy and paste that Jonathan Price et al. From 2012 to be able to see those different native plant distribution maps. And if I'm guessing correctly, I believe this is Steve, who is also located on Molokai. If Jenny and Steve don't know each other, you guys should connect. Lots of cool Manoa there. Jenny's asking, does anyone know where to buy mamaki seeds? Ooh, let's figure out, oh, Steve's on Big Island. Okay, different Steve. Let's look a little bit deeper, Jenny, and I'll see if I can connect you with anyone on Molokai that might have mamaki.
Another really good idea, Jenny, too, is to check in with your Division of Forestry and Wildlife. Go check out those forest reserves. You can get a permit to collect mamaki seeds for your, you know, if it's for personal use, they might not even charge you. And if you get like 5 seeds, that's like, you know, 5 fruits is like 500 seeds. So, so we can definitely show you how to clean those as well. So real fast, real simple, real easy. You could have hundreds of mamaki, you know, within a year from now.
Yeah, and you know, checking in with your local forestry and wildlife is a great way to explore different areas that might not be open or easily accessible to the public without 4-wheel drive. So it would be a really cool opportunity to go up and see some of those high elevation forests on Molokai and be able to collect from your island with the help of really knowledgeable people of that area. Okay, just a few more comments. Small mamaki plants. Okay, so AJ's got a little bit of mamaki already, and then uhaloa was a comment. We have a really healthy, vigorous clump of uhaloa at our project at Heia State Park, and I was just down there touching it, playing with it, admiring it yesterday. And yeah, so many people see it as a weed, unfortunately, but that is a really awesome comment. I'm glad you dropped uhaloa in the chat box, because that is another great coastal plant that just can be really plentiful with seeds as well. So love the ideas, AJ. We're gonna just throw a bunch of plants and baby seeds at you and see what'll stick in that area. Okay, any other questions or comments? Come off mute and feel free to ask. Otherwise,
wait a minute. Will isn't a weed?
What's that?
That's not a weed.
Uhaloa.
I just Googled it. I was like, we have that everywhere. Don't pull that one out.
Jenna, correct me if I'm wrong. There is non-native that looks similar.
There is a non-native that looks similar, and I have heard some, you know, whispers about is uhaloa native or not. I claim it as native though, so I would leave them in there. Those two, you just clip off those flowering heads and just. I like to just Johnny Appleseed everywhere. I feel like that's the best way, you know. Growing plants in the nursery is great, but if they can grow naturally, like, you know that it was meant to be there. So feel free to Johnny Appleseed. Clip those heads off, throw them around, spread the wealth.
Yeah, having that big clump of uhaloa on public property at Heia State Park and readily available in that area has been important to me, especially during this time of COVID. Just in case we want to have something, it's a la'aulapa'au plant that is really good for the respiratory system. You can take leaves of it just like you would with a mamaki or a ko'oko'olau, and then even the root, if you can get down and harvest the root of the plant or more towards the base of the plant and dry the uhaloa bark and the roots, you can just straight up chew on that almost like a piece of beef jerky and get that right into your system, or you can then put that into tea, and it's supposed to be even more potent than the leaves itself. Oh, okay, cool. So we have another comment about mamaki and how to harvest the seeds. So I think in our very first series in October, it was a seed propagation seminar, and we did talk a bit about like mass collection of mamaki seeds, and it was a bit of an involved process because it was like, oh, you can alter your blender, and so it doesn't have blades. So the blades are covered in a plastic, and then you put it all into a blender. But you can just, when the fruits on the mamaki are nice and plump and white, you can pull those off, and the seeds are within that. So Jenna and I can definitely give you some other pointers to help to collect the mamaki. Feel free to reach out to us and email us, and we can send some photos as well, so we can tell you if you've got a while to wait or if it's ready to be harvested. But yeah, I'd love to get my hands on some mamaki seeds too.
I like to call them Barbie brains.
Barbie brains?
Yeah, they're about the size of what a Barbie brain would look like, and they're real squishy, but yeah, it's real easy. You can collect those really soft Barbie brains. Instead of a blender, I just put them in a gallon Ziploc bag with some water, and I squish them all up. And I took a video, so I'll send that video to you, Nolani. It's for the follow-up on how to clean kind of those fleshy seeds. It was with Ohelo Kai, but it's basically the same concept.
Awesome. Very cool. Great. Cool. Thank you guys so much. This was really awesome discussions in the chat. I really appreciate Jenna's time out in the field and our staff that got to go out and help her with outplanting too. They were in the backgrounds and having a fun day without me, but that's okay. I'll get back into Pohole one of these years. And so thank you guys for joining us on the Zoom today, and also anyone that's watching live on Facebook, thank you for joining us. I will be posting the replay and the recordings of this to our YouTube channel, and you can get all of the past videos from past months on our YouTube channel as well. And we will be continuing this series throughout the rest of the year on the second Saturday, utilizing the same link that you guys joined with today. So feel free to jump on to our future sessions. We might switch it up actually for next month. We're going to be going live from our project at the Heia Estuary, and we're going to be doing our water quality sampling live and doing a little tour through the estuary next month. So that'll be a cool event if you want to kind of look into the monitoring, the specific types of monitoring that we do from that project site. Oh yeah, thanks for mentioning our good friends. Actually, my relatives on Big Island this weekend are hosting the Willy Willy Festival from the Kailua Dry Forest Initiative. So they've got a set of virtual and in person. If you're on the Big Island, Steve, check it out. They've got some really cool highlights showing the preserve and different discussions going on all weekend, I believe. Yes, thank you so much for putting that in the chat. So check out the Willy Willy Festival this weekend, and there are events going on all month highlighting the Hawaii Invasive Species Awareness Month from each of the islands. So I'm not sure which island is coming up this week, but we'll also be doing a closing ceremony from our project at Heia at the end of the month, because we've had a kuahu open all month and different islands have added to the kuahu with plants from their island throughout the month, and we're having discussions online as well. And we'll close the kuahu at the end of February, right from our project at Heia State Park. Oh, sweet, Sana says that Oahu is this week. So check out the series of discussions online. There's virtual talks every day. And feel free again to reach out to me if you want to be connected with Jenna or have any other questions. Definitely send us an email. And before you guys go, I'm gonna put up, oops, I thought I was gonna put up a poll. Let's see. I don't know. I was gonna try to put up a poll. There it is. Okay, 2 questions. If you guys wouldn't mind just answering these quick 2 questions for us before you say ahui ho. Kalea, sorry, yeah, if you guys want information on the virtual talk, if you're interested in the Willy Willy Festival, you can go ahead and Google Kailua Dry Forest Initiative or Willy Willy Festival, and it should bring up info for that. I can also share on our Instagram right now some reposts from them. And then Hawaii Invasive Species Awareness Month. You can Google that as well and it should pop right up. But I think we've got everything linked from our Instagram page as well. Sana's nodding yes. Awesome. Okay, you guys, thank you so much for joining us on Zoom and on Facebook Live. Really enjoy these monthly sessions. I definitely learn a lot and love chatting with you all about your individual project sites. So thank you for joining us. Keep checking in with us each month and check out the replays on our YouTube channel. Jenna, thanks so much for your time and all your knowledge. Thanks, everybody. Ahupuaa.